And we are back on the Zero Hour. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, which for some reason I wound up pushing heavily this time, I don't mean to, but if you watch, you just saw me typing on my laptop there. It looked just like, those really professional guys on MSNBC and NBC and CNN and Fox and all that. I love the way they're always typing there, that Brian Williams thing. I just don't have the hair. But anyway, listen, we got serious things to talk about. Social Security disability insurance. In particular, our next guest is Rebecca Vallas. Rebecca is the Associate Director of the Poverty to Prosperity Program at the Center for American Progress. Try saying that 3 times fast. In this capacity, she plays a leading role in the Center's anti-poverty policy development and analysis, and she's recently written and co-authored an excellent piece on the current state of Social Security disability insurance. You're hearing a lot of scare talk and hysteria, and frankly, I think scapegoating of disabled Americans on the right, and Rebecca is here to talk to us about that situation. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, and I appreciate your intro. Could not agree more with the way you just framed that.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that because, it's become so overheated, and one of the things I really appreciated about your piece on this was it just brought some sanity to the debate. There's a lot we could talk about. Number one was you compared, and I think this is so important for Americans to understand when we hear talk about somehow these programs are generous. That's one of the code words we hear. How does, and one of the things you addressed was, how does the United States disability program compare with that of similar countries?
I agree completely. I think it's a really important comparison, and I think it's something that often is entirely missing from the debate that we hear about vital programs like Social Security disability insurance. The fact is that the United States has one of the strictest disability standards and set of eligibility criteria in the entire world. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD as it's usually called, they do an annual ranking. They actually take a look at how countries around the world structure their disability benefit systems. And so when they compare the United States disability insurance program with comparable programs around the world, what they find is that we actually have not only one of the strictest standards in the entire world, as I said, but also one of the least generous programs. They rank us all the way at the bottom. The only country that has a least generous disability benefit program than we do is Korea.
And so, if it weren't such a serious problem, I'd be tempted to repeat that old joke about such terrible food and such small portions. It's so hard. It's so hard to get into this program. We make it so difficult. And then we give so little for people who are disabled, clearly through no fault of their own. One of the other things we hear, and I think I love that you make the point about the difficulty getting in, because there's so much scare talk that they're freeloaders and so on, when really we're very tough about those sorts of things. And in terms of those benefits, one of the things that keeps coming up on the right as an attack on the program is something that actually the right originally celebrated, which was the idea that we should give people incentives when they're disabled to get back to work. Mm-hmm. So if you're receiving disability insurance, but you're able to, let's say, learn a new line of work that if you're not capable of doing the old one, you can learn a new one. You can collect some benefits as you begin to earn money. That gives you an incentive to push yourself back into the workforce, perhaps by learning a new skill or physical therapy, whatever it might be. So now the right is attacking that, aren't they?
Well, the fact of the matter is, as you said, it's incredibly difficult to qualify for benefits. Only people with the most severe illnesses and the most significant disabilities are the ones who qualify. It's not a catch-all program for anyone who has a disability. And actually, most people who apply for the program are actually denied, and fewer than 4 in 10 are approved, even after all levels of appeal. So I think, you take a look at the facts and you realize it's actually incredibly hard to get benefits. The way I like to say it is, it's hard to get on, and it's hard to live on. And so that takes us to the second point that you made, that the benefits are just so incredibly stingy. They actually only replace less than half of pre-disability income for the typical worker. So, nobody would choose to go on disability if they were able to continue working. And when you take a look at who the beneficiaries are, who the people are who actually meet that strict disability standard, you find that they're people with significant disabilities, serious illnesses, chronic heart failure, cancers, emphysema, kidney failure, and so forth. And so it's actually no surprise that about 1 in 5 Social Security disability insurance beneficiaries die within 5 years of getting benefits. And that doesn't even count the thousands who die each year waiting to be approved. So as I said, it's hard to get on, and then it's hard to live on.
Which is another disgrace. The fact that they have to wait because not enough money is being budgeted to get these applications reviewed and these benefits to them. And then speaking of the money side of it, the latest wave of hysteria we hear and misleading language is, oh, the disability trust fund is going to go bankrupt. It's running out of money. All that means is that the surplus, once it's gone, even if we did nothing, we could still pay 80% of benefits, but there are very simple things we can do, and you address that a little bit. So let's try to clear up a little bit of the scare talk and talk about what is the projected shortfall and what can we do to fix it.
So, as you noted, something that has actually been projected going back to about 1995 was that the Social Security Disability Insurance Trust Fund would have its reserves depleted by the year 2016. So, as you noted, and as I'm going to repeat because I think it bears repeating, this is not something that was unforeseen. This is not a new development in the program. We've known going back to 1995 that we were going to face this situation. But also worth people understanding is that this is not an unprecedented situation. This is something that has come up 11 times in the history of Social Security in this country. And each time that it's come up, Congress has done what has basically become routine housekeeping for the Social Security programs, which is to rebalance the trust funds. And that adjusts for demographic shifts and other changes that have caused one or the other of the trust funds, either the Old Age and Survivors Trust Fund or the Disability Insurance Trust Fund, to need a little bit of extra money to continue to pay all scheduled benefits. So we're facing a situation that we've seen almost a dozen times before, and which is basically just a routine action is needed. And unfortunately, what's happened is it's become politicized. As you said in your framing, it's become this political football, just like the government shutdown or the debt ceiling, anything else that we've seen in terms of regular congressional business that's become politicized so that you end up with kind of more myths out there than facts and gridlock instead of routine congressional business. I think the other thing that's worth pointing out, because it gets mixed up in all of these kind of myths and misunderstandings about why we're facing the situation coming up to 2016 that we are. People, I think, have a lot of misunderstandings about trends in the program and why we've seen growth in the number of people who are receiving Social Security disability insurance beneficiaries over the years. And the fact of the matter is, and you can ask the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration, because this is something he's spent a lot of time thinking and talking about in the last couple of years, is explaining why the program has grown. The fact is that the growth is almost entirely explained by the fact that the baby boomers have aged into their high disability years, which is their 50s and 60s, and women entered the labor force in significantly greater numbers in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And so now they've reached parity with men in terms of labor force participation. And through that, coverage by Social Security in case they become disabled before they reach retirement age. Third factor is population growth. So when you combine those three, you explain the growth that we've seen. And so not only is this not a surprise, but it's just something that we expected and that the actuaries knew was going to happen going back to the 90s. And that's where we find ourselves now. But I think, unfortunately, as the old Mark Twain quote goes, the fiction can fly half the way around the world, while the truth is still at home tying its shoes.
Well, exactly right. And the fact is also, I think there's a terrible irony in the fact that the right is insisting on pushing policies that would keep people in the workforce until an even later age, raising the Social Security and Medicare ages even higher. Social Security's retirement age is going up, which makes people even more likely to be disabled on the job at the same time that they're trying to clamp down even more on these stingy and difficult to get disability benefits. So thanks so much for shining some much needed light on this issue, Rebecca Vallas from the Center for American Progress, and thanks so much for joining us.
Really appreciate the time, and thanks for having me on.
You bet. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we will be right back after this. This is The Zero Hour.